they regard this as calibrated, measured, but inevitable after the humiliations, a word that one or two Iranian officials have used, that I've spoken to them privately, of what Israel has done to Hezbollah, who are, after all, their guys in southern Lebanon. But that they would be perfectly happy for a line to be drawn under this latest exchange. So the big question, I think you're right, will be, how does Netanyahu intend to respond?
How do we assess Israel's success at repelling Iran's massive missile attack? Does it give them freedom to step up attacks on Iran's proxies and perhaps even Iran itself? The Times' Richard Spence is just north of Tel Aviv for us, and he can give us the latest now. Richard, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Like most people in Israel yesterday, you had to run to a bomb shelter. How does it feel waking up this morning?
Well, it feels. What's extraordinary about this place is that, this whole region, in some ways, is that you have these extraordinary events, and then everyone just gets up and carries on because, to some extent, they're all so used to it. So, people in Tel Aviv have been under rocket attack for months because of what's going on in Gaza, and indeed for years because they've always had the threat of rocket attacks from Gaza. So when the sirens go off, everyone knows what to do. Everyone's quite cheerful, heading down to their cellars, their basements, their safe rooms, and then they come out again and get on with life. And I'm on the motorway today, full of cars, full of traffic. There is a bit of that, but what people do wonder is what happens next. And it does all come down now to Netanyahu and his war cabinet. Do they respond directly to Iran, or do they, take a more laid back view and say, well, we've taken out Hezbollah, we've taken out half of Hamas. We've had this response from Iran. It hasn't done a huge amount of damage as far as they're saying. Maybe we just take the win for now and carry on with our previous priority, which was this operation in southern Lebanon.
That doesn't sound necessarily the latter option. Psychologically, what Netanyahu would be known for. I guess the question that precedes that, in a way, Richard, is this: that Iran has now had two big barrages against Israel, neither one of which has done anything. So actually, could we conclude that Iran can't really touch Israel, and therefore, does that change the power dynamic at all? Does it feel that Israel can go harder because it knows that its enemy is relatively at great cost in terms of financial cost, and it's a lot of hardware repels it? But Iran has basically shown with two big goes, it can't really do very much to Israeli infrastructure.
Yeah, I think those will be the questions that Netanyahu is weighing up for sure. And I think, one of the interesting things about Netanyahu over the years is he's shown himself to be much more cautious than his rhetoric would suggest. Until this last war with Hamas that started a year ago, which after the events of October the 7th was pretty much inevitable, under Israeli military doctrine. He hasn't launched any major war. In fact, he's never invaded Lebanon like his predecessors did. He's never had to make these really, really monstrously big decisions about, the sort of thing that, reshapes the Middle East. That's clearly now the case if he's going to attack, if he is going to attack Iran. Yes, there's a big school of thought now that says, Iran has really shown itself to be a paper tiger now. It's lost the entire leadership of Hezbollah, which was its most important ally, its most important proxy militia. These two missile attacks have shown that it can't really do much in response, except go nuclear, except develop this nuclear weapon that we've been talking about for so many decades, and Israel is determined to prevent that happening. So that's why this is such a key moment. But there is a bit more, I think, to it than that. I may be in a minority, but it didn't try very hard. It has more missiles than the ones it sent yesterday. It just does seem to have notified, somehow got a message to America, therefore to Israel, to be prepared for it. It does look as if Iran itself was not escalating too far.
That's so interesting. Well, we'll see if Netanyahu responds in kind or sees that as a moment of weakness to exploit further. The point you said about the Middle East being reshaped is a fascinating one, and one we will have to just see whether it plays out before our eyes. Richard, always good to speak to you. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
That's Richard Spencer there. He's our expert on the Middle East. He's just north of Tel Aviv. Let's talk to Peter Westmacott, former British ambassador to the US. He started his career with a diplomatic posting in Tehran. Peter, good morning to you.
Morning.
This moment that we could be reshaping the Middle East, is that the right way of thinking about it? That what Netanyahu does next, what happens in the next 48 hours, could be very significant indeed.
Yes, I think you're right. The reason I pause is because I do think that from the Israeli point of view, from Netanyahu's point of view, there is quite a lot of advantage in pressing home what they have done so far. They've hit Hamas very hard. They've gone after Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. They are, in a sense, goading the Iranians. There are people in Iran who think that Netanyahu's trying to set a trap, if you like, for them. They did not react, and they were asked not to react after the killing of Haniyeh in Tehran, at the inauguration of the new president. People said to them, please don't overdo this. We do not want escalation. And the messaging that you've had from the Iranians since yesterday's ballistic missile attacks, which were clearly more significant than what they did in April, have also been one of escalation. I mean, what I'm hearing is that they regard this as calibrated, measured, but inevitable after the humiliation, it's a word that one or two Iranian officials have used that I've spoken to them privately, of what Israel has done to Hezbollah, who are, after all, their guys in southern Lebanon. But that they would be perfectly happy for a line to be drawn under this latest exchange. So the big question, I think you're right, will be, how does Netanyahu intend to respond? And what the Iranians are a bit concerned about is that they think that between now and the 5th of November, the presidential elections, there will be almost no political constraint applied to the Prime Minister of Israel from Washington, who are, after all, the people who are capable of applying the greatest leverage. So I think this is a tricky moment. It seems to me that the Iranians do not want to see escalation. We've all rather forgotten that the new president, Pezeshkian, was really rather moderate with his language at the General Assembly, and the interview that he did on CNN the other day. They're not looking for this thing to get worse. They claim they didn't even know that October the 7th was going to happen when Hamas launched this latest round of horrific attacks. So I think what is the decision of the Israeli government is going to be of critical importance in determining what happens now.
And presumably it is possible for Israel to fire missiles directly into Iran. And Iran doesn't have the same defense systems, the same money, the same military capabilities as Israel. That's presumably a possibility, that there is a direct attack of some form or another onto Iranian territory from Israel.
Yes, and of course they did it before. If you recall, there were strikes from Israel after the April barrage of drones and cruise missiles from Iran towards Israel, almost none of which hit any targets. And then the Israelis did a kind of calibrated, specific, but very clear warning by sending some missiles at a military airbase not very far from the nuclear installations at Natanz near Isfahan. So you're absolutely right. They've got the capability of doing this. They haven't done it so far. There's a lot of talk amongst hardliners in Washington as well as in Israel about using this opportunity to strike at Iran's nuclear facilities in order to slow down. They can't stop it. In order to slow down their nuclear development program. So yeah, they could do it if they wanted to further escalate.
And presumably the notion that Richard was just saying, that Netanyahu has been relatively cautious compared to his rhetoric. But if you look at the last 2 weeks, there's a crest of a wave here happening in terms of the Israeli military and intelligence successes. The pager attack, the walkie-talkie attack, they've gone into Lebanon, they've attacked Houthis in Yemen. Do you feel that Israel, at least Netanyahu, will feel there's a momentum here and they want to maybe strike harder because of that?
I think that may be right. The Iranians didn't react for quite a while after the killing of Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran. They were asked not to. Messages were sent from different capitals around the world saying, let's keep this thing under a lid, if you like, let's keep a lid on it. And then, as they see it, Israel went off and began the further onslaught on Hezbollah with the pagers, with the other explosive devices, and then with the airstrikes against Hezbollah bases in southern Lebanon. So they feel that they have no choice but to take some sort of action of that kind. So, that is where we are.
It is where we are, and where we'll be in a day's time, nobody necessarily knows. Peter, really useful to talk to you. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you.
That's Peter Westmacott, their former British ambassador to the US, making clear that this could become a hot war relatively soon, and also that there's 33 days to the American election, and therefore no one in Washington really has the moral or political authority to do very much. So whatever Netanyahu decides to do, there won't be very much check coming from America.
So for the second time, Iran has launched a massive missile attack on Israel. And for the second time, the missiles have bounced off Israel's defences. Does Iran have to reassess its position or keep going? Ali Ansari is Professor of Iranian History at St Andrews, and he joins us now. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Many people, I suppose, will, on the face of it, be asking this question. And I understand that there are reasons. Iran knows about the Iron Dome. They know about missile defence systems. And nevertheless, they launched this attack anyway. So was this symbolic? Was this in response to what's happening in southern Lebanon? Or is it something else? Why are they doing this?
So I think in large part, there were obviously pressures within the system that they had to be seen to be doing something. So this is in one element quite performative. I mean, it's a bit like the attack in April, where it's a very showy affair, large number of missiles. It looks quite devastating in the sky. There was a lot of reaction, obviously, last night as Twitter and other social media sites showed various activity over Israel. On the other hand, I do question myself, given their experience and what, you assume they know. But it seems to be that, from what I can understand, the Revolutionary Guards in Iran have a heightened sense of their own capabilities and feel that the Israelis, in some senses, don't have matching capabilities. I mean, they misassess this, if I can put it that way. So there's an element of bombast that's taking place in Iran itself among hardliners.
That's very interesting. And will that be reflected in coverage of this event within Iran? I mean, will there be a narrative on TV that we did this and it was really successful?
Yes. I mean, they did so last time. I mean, last time they had all sorts of odd videos of, settlers fleeing Israel and everyone sort of leaving and going back to America and so on and so forth. I mean, there was a lot of bluster in Iran, and not so much obviously outside Iran. I mean, I'm struck again, for instance, that the Iranian Foreign Ministry has very quickly said that this military action is now over. They're all they're very quick to sort of shut the whole thing down and then put the ball back in Israel's court. The difficulty for them now really is that I think it's highly likely that the Israelis will retaliate, and they will retaliate now probably with very little restraint from the United States. I mean, there's a sort of a willingness to sort of urge the Israelis on in this respect, obviously within a certain number of parameters, but it won't be a sort of I doubt what the Israelis will do this time will be simply a sort of a symbolic attack against a single Iranian airbase, for instance. I mean, it will be slightly more extensive.
Let's speak now to the IDF spokesman, Lieutenant Colonel Peter Lerner. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Iran must pay is what we're hearing. That obviously means an attack is inevitable. Is it imminent?
So, of course, it is not without context. Over the last year now, Israel has been under attack from 7 fronts, all of them orchestrated by Iran. Last night was just the latest realization, as you rightly pointed out. Some 180 ballistic missiles were fired at Israel. The vast majority of them were either intercepted or landed and hit open areas. And therefore, I would say, luckily, perhaps in some miraculous act, very little damage and unfortunately only one person that was killed, a Palestinian in the area of Jericho. The indiscriminate fire towards Israel is a challenge, but not a surprise. And I think our aerial defense systems withheld the attack quite well. With regard to the type of response. I think it's important to note that anyone that has been attacking us, and we've seen it over the course of history, but of course in the last year extensively when Hamas launched their attack against us, and Hezbollah over the last year joined in to try and divert our attention from the south to north, will pay dearly. And I think to echo both what the IDF Chief of Staff has said last night is that we will exact the price on Iran as we see fit. I think that it is an unfortunate escalation, but from our perspective, and I'm sure you understand, a reality that a country launches and puts 10 million people in the shelters unprovoked, and in a situation where they fire extensively and they just don't care to cause death and destruction is unacceptable.
So you've said that you'll react as you see fit, and many people will support you in that. However, there will be some caveats, and that will be that you have to be as mindful as you possibly can of civilians, because they become collateral damage. Up to 40,000 people have died in Gaza. I know that those figures are disputed by some people. 1,000 in Lebanon. That's the worry. Can you give any assurances that even though you will react as you see fit, that you will try your hardest to protect the civilian population of Iran?
So this is a very distinct double standard Israel is held by. Iran launched indiscriminate fire towards all of Israel yesterday. Yet the IDF is conducting, as we speak, precision strikes against Iranian proxy Hezbollah rocket storage places, cruise missile capabilities that are all intentionally pre-positioned in residential areas beneath buildings. What we do first is we tell the people to evacuate the location. And this is exactly the vast contrast between Israel and our enemies who are bent on our destruction. They have not come to terms that we are here, and we are determined to defend ourselves, and we have the resolve. And I would absolutely say, of course, we will continue to operate within the realm of the laws of armed conflict to limit civilian impact, but absolutely take out the threat.
I hear exactly what you're saying, and the intention of Iran, although it was unsuccessful, it was indiscriminate, and they were clearly not bothered about civilians. I completely take that on board. Going the other way, though, an attack by Israel on Iran is a different thing, isn't it? Because they don't have a missile defense system, and I'm not talking about the government. I'm talking about the civilians. There's no missile defense system to repel those missiles, and I don't think they have as many bomb shelters or that kind of bomb shelter system that you so successfully have in Israel. So is it an equal war that's being waged? And I'm talking about civilians. I'm not talking about the Iranian regime.
Iran is a regional power. It's not a terrorist army like Hezbollah or Hamas in the Gaza Strip or in Lebanon. They have the responsibility of a sovereign power as well. When they wage war on a country, there are consequences to it. They need to take that into consideration before they conduct the indiscriminate rocket fire, ballistic missile fire that they conducted yesterday. So, of course, we will hold ourselves to the standard that we constantly do in every single operation and in every arena. And so I understand the concerns, but the concern for the war is that 180 ballistic missiles cannot be tolerated anywhere in the world by a nation firing indiscriminately, putting an entire country of 10 million people in the shelter with intention to kill, destroy, destruct, and death, and for no reason.
We were hearing from a correspondent earlier who was hiding with his family in his basement, kind of bomb shelter within his house last night. And he was saying that every time whatever it is that goes up to destroy the missile coming in, it's £2 million each time. I don't know if you if you can confirm that, but that's an incredibly, obviously it's worth every penny for you guys, but that's an incredibly expensive defense system. How sustainable is that?
The question of sustainability is important, but it's not the heart of the discussion from our perspective. We invest in, even from the individual protections that the announcement services that we do, from applications, apps on traditional media on cell phones, to the sirens that are broadcasted, from the individual protections that an individual needs to take cover in every house that has been built in the 90s here in Israel is compulsory by law to have a bomb shelter individually in each apartment. So there's individual protections, and I would, and then of course there's the national protections, the defense, the active defense systems, which are the rocket missile defense systems that we have, which have proven themselves time and time again from the different attacks from Hamas in Gaza, from Hezbollah in the north, and now also from Iran. So we don't put a price tag on life. We elevate to the moment, and yes, of course, there is concerns for it. We need to manage the arsenal so that there is enough to conduct the protection actions. We need to keep in mind also that think about this: the moral dilemma of protecting air bases, for instance, or power stations to residential areas. If you have no power, then everything shuts down. If you have no air bases, then you can't protect the skies. So there's a constant weigh up of those issues. I would say, though, that ultimately the idea is to make sure that there is, and the name Iron Dome is just one of those systems, but it is a very good analogy of what we're trying to do, is to keep the skies safe, to fear off any of these threats that are dealt to us. But of course, that cannot go unanswered. That the action of Iran yesterday is unacceptable.
Finally, I want to ask you about what's happening in Lebanon. Our tension slightly slipped from Lebanon, but there was a limited ground invasion. Can you bring us up to date on that? I mean, I'm reading on another news website, excuse me, that Israel is sending more troops into Lebanon. Is that something that's happening this morning?
So what we revealed yesterday was the result of many months of covert operations. I don't know if you've actually seen it, but what we found in covert special forces operations in very, very tiny units, special forces like the commando units that went in on the Lebanese side of the border, we found the staging grounds, ammunition bunkers, operational activity, all different types of intelligence, all adjacent to the border area. So Hezbollah had been planning, and not only planning, realizing their plan of action to conduct a 7th of October type of attack. All of those attack infrastructure needs to be dismantled. So while with the special forces, there is only a limit of what you can do. What we began yesterday morning, and has increased this morning as well with additional forces, is targeted precision operations in and around the border area on the Lebanese side, north of our border, but it is focused on those specific areas to prevent an October 7th type of scenario. Obviously, that is what we're concerned. We have 60,000 people that have been living out of home now for a year. They're demanding to go home, but they will only go home if there is safety and security for them. The government instructed the IDF 2 weeks ago to restore safety and security so that Israelis can go home. That's after a year of diplomatic efforts that did not realize that outcome, that necessary outcome. And that is why we're currently conducting these operations. But they work in conjunction with the other actions that we're doing against Hezbollah. As you know, obviously, we've decapitated the organization's leadership, taking out the most senior commanders of the organization, but also operational commanders and tactical commanders. And of course, the final, or the third component of our efforts today is also to take out the strategic weapons that they still have. So this is a terrorist organization that had, at the beginning of this war, some 200,000 missiles, rockets, and drones, the largest arsenal of, the strongest non-state actor in the world, but I would say with an arsenal more than a rocket arsenal, missile arsenal, more than most European countries.
Right.
And these were all, pointed towards Israel. So we're taking out strategic assets, those that have the guided missiles that have multiple launch systems.
Okay.
So they can't pose a significant threat.
Okay, well, thank you for bringing us up to date on that. That is Lieutenant Colonel Peter Lerner. He's IDF spokesman.